Steel behind black water ahead. Moon on the spears, fear in the breath. Dust like thunder rolling our name. Why did we leave old ghosts, same chain?
There is a question buried in Exodus 17 that nobody in the chapter asks out loud, but everything that happens revolves around it. Is God here or not? See, Israel is thirsty, again, and there is no water, again. And they contend with Moses so fiercely that actually Moses is afraid they're going to stone him. And what they're really asking underneath the anger and the fear is one of the most honest theological questions for a human being to ask. Is the Lord among us or not? And God's answer is a rock, a rod, and a river, and it has not stopped flowing since. So welcome back to Come Listen With Me. I'm Ricky Black, aka Elder Eleazar, and this is our Friday, April 17th reading of week 16 on our ongoing 2026 Come Follow Me study of the Old Testament. And today we are in Exodus 17, all 16 verses, and it's two major events packed into one chapter. It's the water from the rock at Horeb and the battle with Amalek, where Aaron and Hur hold up Moses' hands. Now, both of these scenes, they carry some of the richest Christological typology in the entire Pentateuch. And there is a Hebrew word that is hiding in the battle narrative that is going to reshape how you think about faith. So, this is a packed chapter. It's got a lot of layers, so let's read with some intention today and not just passively checking the box. So, as always, before we begin to open our scriptures, here are a few questions that we want to keep in mind to focus that intention as we go through chapter 17 today. First question is, keep in mind, pay attention to what does God use to bring water from the rock, and where have you seen that same object before? Right? We should try to track the rod across the Exodus narrative, and what has it done so far, and what does that tell you about the moment, right? So there's some good clues in there to pay attention to. Then, what does Israel question in verse 7, is the Lord among us or not, reveal about the gap between experiencing miracles and trusting God, right? I mean, they've seen the sea part, the manna fall, and, the bitter waters healed, and yet they still ask this question. So, something to it. Finally, how do the two halves of this chapter connect, right? The rock and the battle seem like separate stories, but both answer the same question: is God among us? So kind of watch between the two and then start looking about how they connect together like that. All right, and with those questions in mind, let's go ahead and crack open our scriptures. And we're going to start off today here in chapter 17 with verses 1 and 2. And all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin, after their journeys according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses, and said, Give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, Why chide ye with me? Wherefore do ye tempt the Lord? So they're at Rephidim, and there is no water. And the verb here for chide, it's actually riv, which is a legal term, right? So this isn't like a casual complaint or questioning. It's a formal legal accusation. The people are putting Moses on trial, essentially, and they're demanding that he give them water, as if Moses personally controls the hydrology of the Sinai Peninsula. And then Moses redirects, right? Why are you testing the Lord? It's a very important redirect. Let's continue on in verses 3 and 4. And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, Wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt, to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, What shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. So here again, Moses is afraid for his life, which is kind of terrifying if you think about it. They've seen him lead them through so much, right, as God's mouthpiece here. And yet they're still always on the verge of something. Because it says right there, they are almost ready to stone me. So, and it's not an exaggeration. Like, stoning was the punishment for a leader who had betrayed his people. And Moses' complaint to God is pretty raw here, right? What am I supposed to be doing with these people? And he's not just managing a logistics crisis, right? He is like one bad hour from his own lynching or stoning in this case, right? All right, so let's continue. Let's do verses 5 and 6. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go on before the people, and take with thee of the elders of Israel, and thy rod wherewith thou smotest the river, take in thine hand, and go. And behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So take thy rod, the rod. It's the same rod that turned into a serpent before Pharaoh, the same one that struck the Nile and turned it to blood, the same rod that was raised over the Red Sea when the waters parted. Every time this rod appears, it functions as the instrument of divine authority, judgment, deliverance, and now sustenance. And it is one object doing three jobs across three acts of the same story, right? And catch up what God says there, right? He says, I will stand before thee there upon the rock. So God is positioning himself on the rock so that when Moses strikes the rock, he's striking where God stands. So the rock does not simply represent Christ in a tidy metaphorical way, like God is on the rock. And when the blow lands on the place where God has placed himself, that's when the water flows, and it comes from that point of impact, right? Between the rod of judgment and the presence of God. Now, Paul understood this. In 1 Corinthians 10:4, he says plainly, they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. So not the rock symbolized Christ, not the rock reminded them of Christ, like the rock was Christ. So Paul was making an ontological claim here. Christ was present in the wilderness, standing on the stone, absorbing the blow, and pouring out water for people who were 5 minutes from murdering their prophet. Let's go on here real quick to verse 7. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the chiding and the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, Is the Lord among us or not? It's always interesting when you're reading a translation. Sometimes it seems like really coincidental, but like you have to give credit to the translators for trying to find words that have the same sort of poetic play on each other, even if that sort of transliteration doesn't carry all the meaning. Particularly because here, the words that are used in Hebrew are like Massah means testing and Meribah means contention. So the names preserve like the memory of the crisis, not the miracle, right? It's the testing and the contention of the people. And Israel named the place for their doubt, not for God's answer. And the question they'd ask, is the Lord among us or not? And it's already been answered by the water pouring from the rock. I mean, I'd say it's been answered so many times before, but they get yet another live answer. God was there. He was standing on the stone. He took the hit, and he gave them a river of water. But here's the thing about that question. It keeps getting asked over and over and over. And not because the answer changes, but because the thirst is more persuasive than memory, right? The pain of today is more present than all the blessings of yesterday, right? And you can watch God split the sea, eat his bread from the sky every morning for weeks, months, years, and still the afternoon when your canteen runs dry, the question's going to come back again, right? Is he here or not? And it's not necessarily faithlessness, but it's a human response. And God doesn't rebuke the question, right? He answers it by providing water. And that's something for us to consider. And we've already seen what he's been doing with the manna, right? Giving them just enough to come back to him and to trust him on a daily basis. Well, many of these miracles are kind of the same concept, on a regular basis. Israel is kind of, moving away from God, and the miracles bring him back to him over and over and over and over again. And it's nice to know that even if we have all these things going on in our life, they all draw us back as a plan to come back to the Lord over and over and over again. It's nice to know. Okay. Let's continue on, verses 8 through 10. And then came Amalek, and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men, and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him and fought with Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Now, this is the first military engagement in Israel's history as a free nation. And remember, they took the long way out of Egypt to avoid confrontations at the forts that were at the border, right? But they can't avoid it any longer. And the attackers here are the Amalekites. Now, they're a nomadic tribe descended from Esau's grandson, right? So back in Deuteronomy 25, 17, 18, it adds a detail that the Exodus account omits, right? The Amalekites attacked the rear of the column. And the stragglers, the exhausted, the weak, right? They did not meet Israel in an open challenge. They targeted the vulnerable. And that matters for understanding why God later commands such a severe consequence against Amalek, right? It wasn't a fair fight. It was predation, right? He was fighting dirty and attacking, it'd be like going into a crowd and trying to attack all the elderly, the women and the children first, the wounded, the disabled. It's just the worst sort of sucker punch you can try to do to people. And so Moses sends Joshua into the valley to lead the defense. And this is the first time that Joshua appears in the narrative by name. I know, if you're used to hearing his name, it's like, oh, there he is. And he will become Moses' successor, right? And his name is Yehoshua, which means Jehovah saves, right? Yahweh saves. It is the long form of the name that would later be shortened to Yeshua or Joshua, what we now know as Jesus. It's the man leading Israel's first battle, literally carries the name of Christ. And I don't think that's a coincidence, right? I think the text doesn't want you to miss this and wants you to pick up on it. And now Moses takes Aaron and Hur and goes up the hill, and he carries the rod of God, right? The same rod, plague, seas, rock, now battle, right? The rod is the thread that ties every act of divine power in Exodus together. So let's see what they do with it here in verses 11 through 13. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hands that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hands, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So I really love this section for a really important reason. You're going to see here in just a second. So when Moses' hands are up, Israel wins. And when they drop, Amalek gains ground. So the text doesn't explain why, right? It doesn't give a theological treatise on the relationship between raised hands, lowered hands, military victories. It just states the correlation. Hands up, Israel prevails. Hands down, Amalek prevails. And the battle in the valley is won or lost actually on that hilltop. Now, Moses' hands, they grow heavy, and he can't hold them up alone. I mean, he is human. He's an older human, too. He's tired in the battle. It's not a sprint. It goes until sundown. So Aaron and Hur sit Moses on a stone and physically hold his arms in place, one on each side, until the sun sets, and then the battle is won. Now, here's what I want you to hear. This is what I've been talking about for a little bit here, because this is where the Hebrew opens a door that most English translations walk right past and never allow you to experience. See, verse 12 says that Moses' hands were steady, right? The Hebrew word is Emunah, right? That is the word that translates as faith everywhere else in the Old Testament. So when Habakkuk says, the just shall live by his faith, that's Emunah. When the Psalms talk about God's faithfulness, that's Emunah, right? It is the word for faith, for faithfulness, for firmness, for steadiness, and for reliability. So in Exodus 17:12, it describes what happens when two men hold up the arms of an exhausted leader until sunset. So the Bible's word for faith is the same word that it uses for Aaron and Hur physically holding up Moses' heavy arms, which means faith is not a feeling. It's not a passive belief or a sure knowledge. It's not sitting in a chair and just agreeing that God exists, right? Faith, emunah, is the act of holding something steady. It is a grip, it's muscle, it's a verb that indicates some sort of action which requires active effort to uphold some position. And if emunah describes what Aaron and Hur do for Moses, then it also describes what faith in God and faith in Christ looks like for us. It's not just believing in Christ or having a sure knowledge. It's actively supporting his work. It's holding up the arms of the people that he sends. It's bearing the weight of someone else's calling because the battle depends on it and they cannot hold a position alone. Elder Rasband actually used this exact image in his October 2024 General Conference address. He's teaching about the sustaining of the prophet, right? So, and President Packard used it in his talk, the shield of faith. And they're not drawing on any sort of like metaphor, like they're drawing on the Hebrew, Emunah. It's a very literal, verb for that they use here. So steadiness, faithfulness, hands held firm by people standing beside you. So every time you sustain a leader, and not by just a passive, raising a hand in conference, but by showing up and serving, holding the weight when they are tired, you're practicing Emunah. You are doing what Aaron and Hur did, and you're making the prophet's hands steady. And the battle in the valley, it depends on it, right? Faith is not passive. If you claim faith in Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior, God and Creator of the universe, you're not declaring belief as some form of sure knowledge. You are giving a commitment to actively support him in all that you do because of that sure knowledge. And that is the beauty of Emunah. All right, let's continue on, verses 14 through 16. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. For he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. All right. So God tells Moses to write it down, right? And this is one of the earliest references to the written record keeping of the Torah. So the command to write it in a book and rehearse it in Joshua's ears means this is not just history. It is instruction for the next generation of leadership. So Joshua needs to know that the battle is not won by superior tactics. It was won by intercession on the hilltop and by the steadiness, the Emunah, of the community that held the intercessor up. So Moses names the altar Jehovah Nissi, Yahweh Nissi. The Lord is my banner. And a banner in ancient warfare was the rallying point. So when the battle was chaotic and dust was thick and you couldn't see your commander, you always looked for your banner. It told you where to stand. It told you who belonged to who, right? Who you belong to. So God is the banner, not Moses, not the rod, not whatever strategy they had. The Lord himself is the thing you look for when you can't see anything else. And the final line, it's the sobering piece, right? The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So this is not resolved in a single afternoon. The Amalekites will reappear in Judges, in Samuel and Esther. It's the predator who attacks the weak at the rear of the column and will keep surfacing throughout Israel's history, like some bad 80s movie, horror villain. And some battles are not won once, like they're won over and over, and generation after generation, by communities that keep holding each other's hands up, by supporting each other, by having faith, by Emunah. And that's all our scriptures for today. Now, two things from today's reading, two things that I really want you to think deeply on as you move into the weekend. First, the rock was Christ. Paul said it. The text shows it. And God stood on the rock and took the strike so the water could flow. So the next time you take the sacraments, this Sunday, just remember that, ponder it. The water is in the cup. It comes from the same place the water at Horeb came from. The rock, Christ, smitten once so you could drink. And the second is, Emunah, right? Remember, faith is not a solo act. Moses could not hold his own arms up. And the greatest prophet in Israel's history, he needed two men with strong shoulders and willingness to stand there until sunset. So who is your Aaron and who is your Hur? And whose arms are you holding up right now? Are you someone's Aaron or Hur? So drop a comment. Tag someone who's been your Aaron or your Hur, like the person who has held you steady when you were too tired to hold the position yourself. Let them know. Give them a shout out. Give them some thanks. And, let them know how they blessed you in your life and your own faith journey as well. We all look forward to seeing it. Tomorrow's day 6. And we're going to close out the week with Exodus 18. And it is a completely different kind of chapter. So No plagues, no battles, no miracles, just Moses' father-in-law showing up from Midian and saying, yeah, the thing that you're doing, it's not so good. And it is a story about delegation, humility, and what happens when, someone with wisdom walks into your camp from outside the covenant. And you're going to want to be here for that. It's a very intimate and inspiring chapter. Also, today's deep dive, the article goes even further into the rock to water and the rabbinic tradition of the traveling well of Miriam and Paul's wilderness Christology and how it all ties together. So the title is The Smitten Rock, Living Water, and Paul's Christology of the Wilderness. You can find it on my Substack already. It's already been live. It's also, I got the link down in the description. So go ahead, dive in. You're going to get a lot more out of today's reading with it. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So with that, see you back here tomorrow. And as always, I appreciate you all and thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time to come listen with me.